my name is Sarah Beth, and this is What I Wish I Knew About Christian Sexuality, Episode 1, The Introduction. So what is this, What I Wish I Knew About Christian Sexuality? This is a series that covers the basics of how to navigate your sexuality as a human being, but in a Christian context. I plan to have 9 different episodes, including this one, that teach everything from the biology of sex to general Christian theology regarding sexuality. So really quick, let's get acquainted more with what I mean by Christian sexuality. So I define Christianity as believing that Jesus died on the cross
for our Cynthias.
And sexuality is how you behave and express yourself sexually. So by combining those, my definition is pretty much just how Christians interact with their sexual being. Pretty simple, right? So then I think, besides all that, we need to get acquainted with one another. At least you need to know more about me. I think it's always important to ask yourself this question of,
wait a minute, who are you?
When receiving information, and because of this, I plan to be as transparent as possible. So like I said in the beginning, my name is Sarah Beth, and I have no degrees in theology, biology, psychology, or sociology. And you're probably like, bro, what are you doing here then? Well, let me tell you what I do know. I am currently getting my master's in history, which means that I have strengths in research and analysis, and this makes interdisciplinary work my strong suit. Moreover, I feel like my personal experience with the church is worth noting. I grew up in the church, and until a couple years ago, I was your average church goyle.
I want a church girl that go to church and read your Bible.
Going to church every Sunday along with the other days of the week that I was volunteering, and volunteering in every ministry possible. You get the picture. Unfortunately, in my final years at the church, I was sexually harassed by multiple men in my young adults group. And when I reported it, I was accused of causing division in the group and blamed for bringing the harassment upon myself. I got to the point where I was practically surviving in every aspect of the word, which pushed me to start going to therapy. My therapist freed me from everything I was feeling. She validated my feelings and gave me the courage and the tools to leave my church with dignity, because it wasn't a healthy place for me anymore. So both of my therapists were Christian therapists. My next therapist would be a sexual trauma specialist who further taught me how to overcome the restrictions that constant sexual harassment put on my sexuality. And quick aside, I want to thank both of my therapists so much. Katina and Lynn, you have changed my life immensely. And honestly, you're both the reason why I was able to put this series together today. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Going back to what we were saying. So I started researching answers for why all of this had happened to me. And in doing that, I came up with the idea for this series. I realized that I was not only undermined by not knowing the truth about my sexuality, but the men that harassed me were also undermined by not understanding how to express their sexuality in constructive and healthy ways. What was interesting to me was how often this conversation of Christian sexuality came up, especially with women who had similar experiences to me with harassment. And with this, I felt called by God to do this series. I find myself in a unique position because I love research, and I'd like to say I'm not too shabby at compiling information and citing my sources. But also, I have experiences that give me understanding for both sides of the party, Christians and people that are not Christian alike. After leaving the church, my mind and perspective were opened so wide that I actually felt ashamed for how long I left my blinders on. By corroborating my experiences with biblical research, I feel like I've crafted a fairly neutral database on information about Christian sexuality that will hopefully allow you to take your blinders off too. I would just like to thank God for giving me all of these resources, experiences, abilities. He's truly the head of this entire project, so thank you. So now, you kind of have an idea of why I'm doing this, but let me get a little bit more into why I'm actually doing this. Oftentimes, if you look online, there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to a ton of stuff, but especially in regard to Christian sexuality. Before I started researching for this project in particular, I tried looking up Christian sexuality on YouTube and then Google. And you wouldn't believe how few sources there are that don't just play into this purity culture and suppressing sexuality narrative. Often what came up were adults telling the youth what to believe, which, no offense, but it just doesn't work for me anymore. Times have changed so rapidly regarding just human sexuality in the past 5 years alone. And I'm tired of hearing advice that just ends up hurting people. Otherwise, I saw videos of people explaining what happened exactly on their wedding night And also, no offense, but you're a little too late if you're getting to that point. I totally understand the motivation for making that type of video, but I think that Christians need to stop addressing issues at the end when it's a little bit too late. I want to get to the root of these issues. And I don't want advice. I need truth and facts and information. Logic. So like I alluded to before, I want to present this information like a database. I want to look at what does the Bible say? And also, what's the science behind sex and relationships? And I want to merge them. And I want to look into how we can apply it to ourselves. One of the more explicit goals that I have is that you walk away from this series thinking more critically about what you believe. Though while I'm trying to remain as objective as possible, I do have other goals of open-mindedness and stuff like that, but I think that that goes hand in hand with this thinking more critically mindset. So just something to be aware of. Another reason why I think that this is important to talk about is the issue with accessibility, which leads into a conversation about how I approached the sources for this. Of course, I used the Bible, but let me just say that it is very confusing and convoluted when it comes to talking about sexuality, as we will see in the series. This is something that I wanted to make sure that I addressed through looking into the historical context, which thankfully I have a historical context Bible because I'm a nerd. But really, it came in handy, and I suggest that you get one too if you're interested in this type of stuff. I didn't want to take advantage of this research database that I have access to. Instead, I wanted to see what you guys can have access to. And thankfully, when you're looking at the basics of Sex Ed 101 and things like that, there are tons of sources available online that are very accessible. But then when it comes to ideas regarding sexuality and Christianity themselves, it gets a little bit dicey. There are a lot of blogs that give advice, and I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the most credible. So all of the sources that I've found and have cited in the description boxes and on the screen and all of that deal with Christian sexuality, I think are credible sources. And so you can kind of start from there and do further research that way. As well, there are a list of supplementary videos on my channel that you can also look into that kind of go into a little bit more detail with the subjects that I'm talking about. And on the subject of sourcing and citations, I also wanted to say that I've put together works-cited Google Docs for every single video, and that will be located in the description box of each video, as well as citations that will be listed on the screen in the bottom right-hand corner if you wanted to double check that I am a credible person using credible sources. So one thing that won't be in those citations though that I did source from were interviews that I conducted. It took me way too long to realize how many people were around me that were affected by the things that I'm talking about in these videos and were willing to let me ask some questions about it. This was by far my favorite part of the entire series, so I also want to give a big thank you to everyone that let me interview them. You are the reason why this series is what it is, so thank you very much. And I'd also like to encourage you viewers to start having conversations with each other also, because I think that you would be surprised with what you would find out about each other, whether it's things that you have in common or even just the freedom that you feel about finally being able to open up with one another. So along with the goal of thinking critically and being open-minded, stuff like that, my main goal in sharing this information is also to prevent harm through information. As you will learn in these videos, there is a ton of church hurt that happens regarding sexuality, whether it's downplaying issues of harassment, assault or violence, or even shame regarding being queer or unplanned pregnancies, or even just purity culture in general. There's a ton of stuff going on that I need to make sure that we clear up through spreading the right kind of information, because knowledge is power. And on top of that, I think that it's hard to disagree with people, which makes this kind of a controversial series, but I think it's super important because hopefully it will start this conversation of thinking critically and talking with people and understanding what the truth of the matter is. I think that it's also worth saying that if you feel like I've said something that is factually incorrect, please let me know. I want to make sure I'm right just as much as you do. So let me know in the comments below in a constructive way and cite your sources so that I can also double check for myself too. I put a ton of thought into these videos, so on that note also, if you feel like there's something that's missing in these videos, it's not necessarily because I disagree with it or even have an opinion on it in general. When I came up with this series over a year ago, throughout that year I've been thinking carefully about how I wanted to structure this series, what information I did want to include and didn't want to include. The idea of this series is that it's the basics of Christian sexuality. So there are going to be some things that aren't included because it gets a little bit too complicated. So if you want to see videos on that, please let me know. If there's enough of you that want to see them, maybe I will continue this series and post videos on that. But for right now, this is the series as it is. And the way that I structured this series is kind of a pyramid structure. So this video is the foundation of the entire series because I'm kind of telling you the methods that I used to do the research for this series. The next two videos are going to be also pretty foundational. We're defining the ideas of Christianity and also our sexual organs. This way we're all on the same page. And then the next three videos after that are the responsibilities of sex with consent and harmful sexuality and the responsibilities of sex itself. And then after that we start looking into human sexuality itself with the two videos, one on queer Christianity and then another on Sexuality 101. And then finally, the video to end it all is the prime example of what Christian sexuality should look like through an analysis of Song of Songs. So I really hope that you enjoy this series. I've been excitedly anticipating its release. Please let me know all the feedback that you have. I'd love to hear it. A couple closing remarks for this video at least. One, all of the videos should be posted by now, so you can just jump right into the series and watch it all. 2, episode 5 does have a trigger warning. I put it at the end of the consent video, which is episode 4. I put it at the beginning of the 5th episode. I put it in the description box. So it's all over the place. You should know. And it's in this video, so you should know. And then I also wanted to talk about my comments policy. It's listed in the description of every video as well. But basically, I'm not going to remove comments unless they are intentionally mean or disrespectful to other people, just because of the sensitive nature of the series and the community that I'm reaching out to. I highly encourage you to be nice to each other, but then also to me. This is also a very sensitive thing for me too. So if you disagree with me, please do it in a constructive way. But if you agree with me, I mean, I'd love to hear that too, honestly. But I hope that you learn a lot and that you enjoy this series, and I will see you in the next video where we talk about what the Bible says. So stay tuned.